I'm standing in front of an old faded map, tracing my finger along the jagged coastline of what people now call North America. It's funny to think that for over 100 years after it was first stumbled upon, hardly anyone cared about this vast land. I'm James Carter, a history buff with a bit of a wandering soul, and today I want to tell you a story about how my country, the United States, rose to become the most powerful nation in the world, even though nobody expected it. Back in the late 15th century, explorers thought the world was a little smaller than it actually is. Take Christopher Columbus, for instance. He was convinced if he sailed west, he'd hit Asia and all the spices and treasures that came with it. Instead, he landed on a string of islands in the Caribbean. He called the locals Indians because, well, who reads maps properly? Turns out the Vikings had already been here centuries before, but their tales were mostly dismissed as drunken sailor stories. No one realized they'd actually found a whole continent. Columbus brought back gold and stories, but no spices. The Spanish monarchs weren't thrilled, but gold was gold, so they told him to keep going, spread Christianity, and bring back more treasure. Meanwhile, the Portuguese were busy sailing around Africa to reach Asia, carving up the world with Spain down the middle of a map, like kids dividing a pizza. You get this side, I get that side. Portugal got Asia and Brazil. Spain got most of the Americas. The interesting stuff, the gold, silver, and people, was in the south, so the Spanish focused their efforts there. North America, at least the part that would be the United States, was mostly ignored because it didn't glitter with gold. The English, curious and competitive, sent explorers north of the Spanish territories, but didn't try to settle until much later. England's first attempt was in a place called Roanoke, in what we now know as North Carolina. They set up a colony in 1585, but it vanished mysteriously, like my last Tinder date. England was then distracted by a war with Spain, and it wasn't until Jamestown, Virginia, that a permanent English settlement took hold. Later, the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth, Massachusetts, bringing with them strict rules. No gambling, no Christmas parties. It was the original party pooper club. As the colonies grew, the French claimed a massive chunk of land in the middle of the continent, called New France, teaming up with native tribes. The British colonies teamed up with others, setting the stage for a showdown called the French and Indian War. Spoiler alert, Britain won and took over Canada and much of the French territory. But wars cost money, and Britain decided the colonies should pay their share through taxes, without giving them a say in Parliament. That didn't go over well, and tensions boiled over into the American Revolution. On July 4th, 1776, we declared independence. But freedom wasn't instant. We fought for 5 more years before the British finally conceded. After the war, our new government was a mess. Imagine 13 roommates all wanting to be the boss, but no one agreeing on the rent. Eventually, the Constitution was written, and George Washington became our first president. At that time, the United States was tiny, with vast lands to the west, still controlled by Spain and France. But then came Napoleon, who wanted to rebuild a French empire here. We got nervous when he reacquired Louisiana from Spain because we needed the Mississippi River for trade. So, in a bold move, we bought the Louisiana Territory for $15 million, $500 million in today's money. That doubled our country overnight. People were having babies like rabbits. 7 kids per family was normal. So the push westward began. We bought Florida from Spain, settled Texas, which went through its own rebellious phase, fought a war with Mexico, and eventually the U.S. stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific. But none of that expansion was without conflict. Slavery tore the nation apart, culminating in a brutal civil war. The North won, slavery was abolished, and the country reunited. Later, we bought Alaska from Russia for $7 million. Seward's Folly, they called it. But it turned out to be a gold mine, literally. Around the same time, American businessmen took control of Hawaii, but the president initially refused to annex it, wanting the U.S. to stay just and lawful. Yet, when Spain clung to its last colonies, Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, war broke out again. After a swift victory, the U.S. emerged as a global power. Then there was the Panama Canal, a colossal project that changed global trade and military strategy. President Theodore Roosevelt pushed it through with characteristic bravado, turning America into a true world power as the 20th century dawned. And that's just the beginning. But as I stare at this map, I can't help but wonder, what's the next big chapter waiting to be written? Something's stirring in the shadows, and I'm itching to find out what it is. The sun was dipping low over the sleepy town of Ashford, a place where everybody knew your name and your business, whether you wanted them to or not. I was sitting at the worn wooden bar of O'Malley's pub, nursing a pint of bitter, when in walked a woman who could stop traffic without even trying. Her name was Charlotte Evans, a striking figure with fiery red hair cascading in loose waves over her shoulders, catching the dim light as if she were a flame in the gloom. She wore a tailored emerald green dress that hugged her curves just right, the kind of dress that hinted at secrets without saying a word. Her black leather ankle boots clicked softly on the hardwood floor, and a silver locket gleamed at her throat like a promise. "Evening, James," she said, sliding onto the stool beside me. Her voice was low, smooth, with just the right amount of mystery. "You look like you could use some company." I chuckled, feeling the familiar thrill of intrigue. Charlotte wasn't the usual Ashford kind. She had that city edge, the kind that made you think she'd seen things most of us only read about in books. "What brings you here?" I asked, swirling the last of my beer. She glanced around, eyes sharp. "I've got a story for you. One that might change the way you see this whole country." I raised an eyebrow. "Is it about gold, war, or maybe a secret treasure map?" She smirked. "Better. It's about how America wasn't always the powerhouse people think it is." How it started as a gamble, a second thought, almost overlooked. I leaned in, the noise of the pub fading as Charlotte began. She spoke of explorers who thought they were sailing to the ends of the earth, only to find lands no one had bothered to claim, of empires drawing invisible lines on maps like they were playing a giant game of Risk, divvying up continents as if they were chess pieces. Her tales were vivid, spiced with the kind of dry wit that made history sound like an adventure novel. She painted pictures of English settlers braving harsh winters, French trappers navigating endless forests, and native tribes living on lands long before any Europeans set foot. I noticed the delicate silver chain on her wrist, the kind of accessory a spy might use to hide a tiny camera or a secret note. But Charlotte wasn't just telling stories. She was weaving a tapestry of secrets, ambitions, and betrayals that had shaped the nation from its very first days. As she spoke, I realized this wasn't just history. It was the prelude to something bigger, something that might still be echoing in the alleys and back rooms of towns like Ashford. Just as she finished her story, the pub door slammed open, and a cold wind swept in, carrying with it a man whose eyes were as sharp as daggers and twice as dangerous. Charlotte's smile faded. "Looks like our chat's about to get a lot more interesting." I reached for my coat, heart pounding. The game was on, and I was right in the middle of it. The man who stepped into O'Malley's that evening was every bit the shadow Charlotte had warned me about. Tall and lean, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that looked like it had been tailored by someone who knew secrets and didn't want the world to see them. His steel blue eyes scanned the room like a hawk hunting prey, finally settling on Charlotte and me. I noticed a faint scar tracing his jawline, adding a rough edge to his otherwise polished appearance. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd walked through countless battles, both physical and political, and came out unscathed. His polished black shoes barely made a sound on the wooden floor, but the tension they carried was deafening. Charlotte's emerald eyes flashed, that spark of fiery defiance never leaving her face. "Well, well, Mr. Blackwood," she said, voice calm but laced with steel. "I was wondering when you'd show up." The man smiled, a cold, humorless twist of his lips. "I always do, Miss Evans. You seem to enjoy stirring up old ghosts." He glanced at me, nodding once. "And you must be James. I hear you're quite the historian. Maybe you'll find my story enlightening." Before I could ask what he meant, he pulled a folded yellowed parchment from his inner coat pocket and laid it on the bar. The pub's low light caught the brittle edges and faded ink, revealing a map, ancient yet unmistakably detailed. It wasn't just any map. This one showed a forgotten slice of land, tucked away between borders no longer spoken of, places erased from official histories. Charlotte leaned in, tracing a finger along the map's jagged lines. "This," she whispered, "is what the powers that be don't want us to find. It's the missing piece in the puzzle of America's rise, the secret land that could rewrite everything we thought we knew." Blackwood's eyes flicked between us. Control of that land means control of the next century. Whoever holds it can shift the balance of power, rewrite treaties, and decide who really rules. And believe me, there are plenty who'd kill for it. I swallowed hard, the weight of the moment settling over me like a storm cloud. It was no longer just about dusty history books or forgotten wars. This was real, dangerous, and it was happening right here, in this quiet corner of England. Charlotte's lips curved into a thin smile, almost daring. "Looks like, James, you're about to have an adventure that'll make history jealous." I glanced at the crowd, the regulars oblivious to the undercurrent of tension swirling around us. The night was just beginning, and already it was clear that nothing would ever be the same. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows like a warning, and deep inside I could feel the past and future colliding, setting the stage for a battle over secrets older than any of us dared imagine. The flickering gaslight outside cast long shadows across Ashford's narrow streets as Charlotte, Blackwood, and I slipped out of O'Malley's, the ancient map carefully folded and tucked beneath my coat. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain and something else, something electric, like the calm before a storm. Charlotte led the way with a confident stride, her emerald dress now hidden beneath a sleek leather jacket, boots clicking purposefully on the cobblestones. Her red hair was pulled back just enough to reveal the delicate curve of her neck, where the silver locket caught the moonlight, a subtle invitation to mysteries yet untold. Blackwood walked just behind us, his hands buried deep in his pockets, the scar on his jaw catching the light every so often, like a secret scarlet thread woven into his otherwise flawless facade. Despite his cold demeanor, I could sense a certain respect between him and Charlotte, like two chess masters locked in a game where every move counted. We reached a small, nondescript townhouse tucked between a bakery and a bookshop, the kind of place you'd walk past without a second glance, but tonight it felt like the epicenter of something seismic. Charlotte pulled a key from a hidden pocket and unlocked the door with a soft click. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old paper, leather-bound books, and just a hint of jasmine, Charlotte's signature, I guessed. The walls were lined with shelves crammed full of dusty tomes and faded photographs. A single lamp cast a warm glow over a large oak table strewn with maps, letters, and strange artifacts. "Welcome to my little sanctuary," Charlotte said with a sly grin, "where history meets the present, and sometimes where the future gets rewritten." Blackwood stepped forward, placing his hand on the map. "This land," he said quietly, "was erased from most records, not because it never existed, but because powerful people wanted it hidden. It's rich in resources, strategically placed, and, most importantly, it's a key to influence that no one's ready to admit." I ran my fingers over the map's creases, imagining the untold stories buried beneath its surface. So, what now? Are we just supposed to sit on this and watch the world go by? Charlotte's eyes twinkled. No, James. We're going to find it. We're going to uncover the truth. I couldn't help but smirk. Sounds like a road trip. Should I pack my bags, or is this more of a sneak around in the shadows kind of mission? Blackwood chuckled, a rare softness in his voice. A bit of both. And trust me, you'll want to keep your wits about you. This isn't just about land, it's about power, betrayal, and secrets that could topple governments. As the rain began to patter against the windows, I felt a thrill unlike any I'd known. History had always been my escape, but now it was pulling me headfirst into a game far bigger than I'd imagined. And with Charlotte and Blackwood by my side, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The early morning fog hung heavy over Ashford as Charlotte, Blackwood, and I slipped out of her townhouse, each of us carrying the weight of the secret map like a live wire sparking between us. The streets were eerily quiet, the usual bustle replaced by a ghostly stillness that made every footstep echo like a warning. Charlotte wore a fitted navy trench coat that swayed just enough to hint at the curve of her hips beneath, paired with dark jeans and those ever-present black ankle boots that had become her signature. Her silver locket caught the pale dawn light, glinting like a secret waiting to be unlocked. Blackwood, always impeccably dressed, looked like he'd stepped straight out of a noir film, his charcoal suit jacket buttoned tight against the chill. We piled into my old Land Rover, nothing fancy but reliable, and headed out of town, the map spread across the dashboard. The destination was a place few had ever heard of, a forgotten patch of land tucked between borders that had shifted like sand over centuries. As we drove, Charlotte broke the silence. You know, James, if this turns out to be just a wild goose chase, I swear I'm making you buy the first round for the rest of your life. I smirked. Deal. But if we find something big, you're buying. Blackwood grunted, eyes on the road. Focus, both of you. This isn't a game. The landscape shifted from rolling hills to dense woodland, the trees looming like silent sentinels guarding ancient secrets. Somewhere in this wilderness lay the lost territory, rich in resources, strategically crucial, and hidden by layers of lies and forgotten treaties. Suddenly, the Land Rover jolted as we hit a pothole, and Charlotte let out a breathy laugh. You should really consider getting that suspension fixed. I shot her a grin. Hey, adventure doesn't come with smooth roads. Hours later, we arrived at a weathered stone cottage that looked as if it had sprouted from the earth itself. The door creaked open to reveal an old man with piercing gray eyes and a knowing smile. He introduced himself as Thomas Reed, the unofficial keeper of local histories, and as it turned out, the guardian of secrets no official map would show. Thomas led us to a dusty cellar where ancient documents and relics lay scattered. Among them, a faded journal detailed the existence of the hidden land and the lengths taken to erase it from history. As I leafed through the brittle pages, a chill ran down my spine. This is bigger than any of us thought, I murmured. Charlotte nodded, her fingers tracing a passage. And now we're part of it. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a warning. The past isn't done with us yet. And as night fell, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes, unseen and unblinking, were watching our every move. The cellar's cold stone walls seemed to close in as I carefully turned another yellowed page of Thomas Reed's journal. The ink had faded, but the words told a story that sent a shiver down my spine. A tale of secret treaties, hidden land deals, and betrayals that stretched back centuries, tangled like ivy choking an old manor. Charlotte crouched beside me, her emerald eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and something darker. Danger, maybe. Her fingers danced lightly over the journal's fragile pages, the silver locket at her throat catching the flickering candlelight like a secret beacon. Blackwood stood near the cellar steps, his sharp gaze fixed on the shadows beyond the doorway, as if expecting trouble to come crashing in at any moment. His polished shoes made no sound, but the tension radiating off him was as loud as a thunderclap. "So this hidden land," I whispered, "it wasn't just erased from maps, it was erased from memory." Thomas nodded gravely. Powerful men wanted it buried, too valuable, too dangerous. They feared what would happen if its true owners or its wealth were ever revealed. Charlotte's voice dropped to a conspiratorial murmur. "And now we have the key to unlocking it. But unlocking it means stepping into a game where the stakes are life and death." I swallowed hard, the weight of the moment pressing down like the cellar's cold stones. "So, what's our next move?" Thomas smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "We follow the clues, of course, but beware. The closer you get, the darker the shadows become." Suddenly, a faint creak echoed from above, a door maybe, or footsteps. Blackwood's hand moved swiftly to his coat pocket, fingers curling around something cold and metallic. "Visitors," he muttered, his voice a low growl. Charlotte flicked a glance toward the narrow stairs. "We need to move. Now." Heart pounding, I grabbed the journal and tucked it safely into my jacket. As we ascended the stairs, the cellar door slammed shut behind us, with a finality that echoed like a gunshot. Outside, the night had deepened, and the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the promise of pursuit. Somewhere in the darkness, eyes watched, waiting. For what, I didn't yet know. But one thing was certain. Our discovery had stirred a hornet's nest, and escaping it would be far from easy. The moon hung high and cold as we raced through the tangled woods behind Thomas's cottage, the journal heavy in my jacket pocket like a ticking time bomb. Charlotte's coat flared behind her, the emerald glint of her eyes cutting through the darkness like a lighthouse in a storm. Blackwood moved ahead, silent and deadly, his every step calculated, as if the forest itself was an enemy to outwit. Branches clawed at my face and arms, and the damp earth sucked at my boots, but adrenaline pushed me forward. Somewhere behind us, the crunch of footsteps echoed. Too many, too close. Whoever was chasing us wasn't about to let a handful of trespassers uncover secrets long buried. Charlotte's voice was steady, yet urgent. "We need to reach the old mill by the river. It's our only chance." "The mill?" I gasped, lungs burning. "Isn't that place abandoned and rumored to be haunted?" she said with a wicked grin. "Perfect for losing unwanted guests." Blackwood barely glanced back but nodded. "If we can make it there, we might find cover, and maybe answers." The river's distant roar grew louder, a wild, relentless force that mirrored the chaos chasing us. Finally, the broken silhouette of the mill emerged through the trees, its rotting timbers groaning in the wind like the last breath of a dying beast. We slipped inside, the air thick with dust and memories. Moonlight filtered through shattered windows, casting jagged shadows that danced on the walls. Charlotte pulled a small flashlight from her pocket, its beam slicing through the gloom. As we settled behind a rusted machine, Blackwood produced a slender pistol from his jacket, checking the chamber with a practiced hand. "If they follow, we won't go quietly." I swallowed hard, gripping the journal. Why all the secrecy? Why hide this land at all? Charlotte's eyes darkened. "Because it holds something no one wants the world to know about. Power, influence, and a legacy that could turn everything upside down." A sudden noise, a floorboard creaking upstairs, made us freeze. The hair on my neck stood on end. Charlotte's hand found mine, steadying. "Ready for the next twist?" Before I could answer, a shadow slipped through the doorway. Not one of our pursuers, but an old man with a mischievous smile and eyes that twinkled with secrets. "Well, well," he said, voice dripping with amusement. "Looks like history has a few more pages to turn." And just like that, the night shifted. The game was far from over. The old man's grin was unsettling, like a fox who'd just found the henhouse door left wide open. He stepped fully into the moonlight, revealing a weather-beaten face framed by silver hair and eyes that sparkled with 1,000 untold stories. "Name's Arthur Blake," he said, voice smooth as aged whiskey. "And I reckon you've stumbled into something far bigger than any of you realize." Charlotte narrowed her eyes but didn't back down. "If you know so much, then why hide in an abandoned mill?" Arthur chuckled, pulling a worn leather satchel from beneath his coat. "Sometimes the best place to hide the truth is in plain sight. Besides, this mill holds memories tied to that map you're clutching so dearly." He reached into the satchel and pulled out a collection of faded photographs, yellowed letters, and a small, intricately carved wooden box. The box seemed out of place, too delicate for the rough surroundings. I leaned forward, heart pounding. "What's inside?" Arthur's eyes twinkled mischievously. "Patience, James. First you need to understand the players in this centuries-old game. The land you seek wasn't just hidden. It was fought over by kings, rebels, and secret societies, and each left their mark." Charlotte's silver locket caught the flashlight's beam again, as if urging us onward. "So, what's the plan? We can't exactly sit here while our pursuers close in." Arthur smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We need allies, people who know the old ways, the forgotten codes. Fortunately, I'm not the only one still watching." Just then, a sharp whistle sliced through the silence, followed by the soft crunch of footsteps outside. Blackwood's pistol was out in an instant, finger poised. "Visitors," he muttered, voice cold. Arthur's expression shifted. "Seems our game just got more complicated." Charlotte moved to the broken window, peering into the shadows. "Looks like they've brought reinforcements." I felt a bead of sweat trail down my temple. "What now?" Arthur opened the wooden box, revealing a faded medal inscribed with symbols I didn't recognize. "Now, we show them that some secrets refuse to stay buried." Outside, the night held its breath. Inside, the pieces were falling into place. But whether for salvation or destruction, we had yet to see. And as the first footsteps reached the mill's creaking door, I knew one thing. This was no ordinary treasure hunt. It was a battle for the soul of history itself. The door to the mill groaned open, and cold air rushed in, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of danger. Shadows spilled across the floor as a group of figures stepped inside, their faces obscured by the darkness, but their intent clear. Blackwood didn't hesitate. His pistol was raised, steady as a surgeon's hand. "Stay calm," he whispered, eyes scanning every corner. "They want the map and the journal. We can't let them have either." Charlotte's fingers tightened around the silver locket at her throat, a small talisman of comfort in the storm. "James, keep that journal close. It's more than paper. It's the key." Arthur stepped forward, his voice low but commanding. "You don't know who you're dealing with. These aren't ordinary mercenaries. They're remnants of an old order, sworn to protect the lies that built empires." A tense silence filled the room, broken only by the soft tapping of boots on wood. Then a voice, smooth, cold and dripping with menace, cut through the air. "Well, well, what a charming gathering," it said. A tall man emerged from the shadows, his tailored black coat brushing the floor. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and unmistakably familiar. "Mr. Blake, Miss Evans, and our historian friend, James, was it? You've caused quite a stir." I swallowed hard, meeting his gaze. "Who are you?" He smiled, but it was a smile without warmth. "Let's just say I'm the guardian of the past, and I intend to keep it buried." Suddenly, a flicker of movement, a flash of steel. Blackwood lunged forward, knocking the attacker's arm aside as a hidden blade glinted in the dim light. Chaos erupted. Charlotte ducked behind a rusted beam, pulling a sleek pistol from her coat. "We need to get out, now." Arthur shoved the wooden box into my hands. "Take this and run. Find the others who can help us. I'll hold them off." "But—" "No arguments." His eyes held mine, fierce and resolute. "History is counting on you." Heart pounding, I darted toward the back exit, Charlotte and Blackwood close behind. Outside, the night swallowed us whole as gunshots rang out behind us, a deadly symphony echoing into the darkness. As we vanished into the forest, the weight of the metal burned in my palm, a symbol of a past that refused to stay silent and a future that depended on uncovering the truth. But one question haunted me. How deep did this conspiracy go? And who could we really trust? We stumbled through the thick underbrush, branches clawing at our faces as the echo of gunfire faded behind us. The metal Arthur had pressed into my hand felt impossibly heavy, as if it carried the burden of centuries. Charlotte's breath came in sharp bursts beside me, her emerald eyes fierce with determination, while Blackwood moved with the silent precision of a predator stalking its prey. "Where now?" I gasped, trying to keep up. Charlotte glanced at the faint glow of the town lights in the distance. "There's a safe house on the outskirts of Ashford. Old contacts live there, people who've been fighting this shadow war long before we stumbled into it." Blackwood's jaw tightened. "We're not just running from men with guns. We're running from a legacy of secrets, one that powerful forces will kill to protect." As we broke through the last line of trees, the safe house appeared. A weathered brick cottage with shuttered windows and a garden wild with untamed roses. We slipped inside, the door closing behind us like a whispered secret. Inside, a group of faces greeted us, weathered, wary, but resolute. Maps and documents cluttered the room, and a low murmur of voices spoke of resistance, of plans to expose the hidden land and the lies that cloaked it. Charlotte unclasped her silver locket, revealing a tiny folded map inside, one that perfectly complemented the ancient parchment Arthur had given us. "Together," she said, "these maps will lead us to the truth." I looked down at the metal in my hand, its intricate symbols catching the flickering candlelight. "So, this is just the beginning?" Blackwood nodded grimly. "The beginning of a fight that will decide who controls history and the future." Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, a distorted voice breaking the tense silence. "They have the maps. Move in. No mistakes." The room froze. Eyes met. Breaths held. Outside, the night pressed against the walls like a living thing, full of secrets and shadows, and as the first knock thundered on the door, I knew one thing for certain. This war for the truth was far from over, but the biggest mystery of all lingered in the air, heavy and unresolved. Who was really pulling the strings behind the scenes, and what price would we pay to uncover them?